Hey everybody, this is GoRegisterMe.com, and this podcast is a story about the flaws behind the class registration system at UNC Chapel Hill, where it's proclaimed as such a prestigious school. This is Jason. I have with me Jessica and May, who has worked with me to complete this podcast.
Hi, this is May. We're your hosts for this podcast and here to talk about the problems that frustrates many Carolina students from the end of a semester all the way to the beginning of the next, with insight from enrolled Carolina students.
Hi, my name is Jessica, and our podcast will be presenting 3 acts. Act 1 will be discussing the daunting task of registering for classes at Carolina and how frustrating this can be. Act 2, we will be looking at different perspectives of the registration process through the lenses of advisors from UNC and also from current Carolina students. The last and final act, we will be focusing on the transfer student population, and we will be talking to them about their perspectives of the registration process at Carolina compared to their previous community college.
Before each semester starts at UNC comes the race to obtain a spot in the classes that you want to get in. I remember entering my second semester at UNC and having registration time session at 12:15 p.m. Class registration started early morning, as early as 8. I remember checking the classes at 10. I saw half the classes I wanted with Carolina blue squares beside them. This meant they were closed. I asked my friends for advice and was told that classes opened up spots for each section, so it's going to be okay for me. But when the clock turned 12:15, I immediately went in to grab my seats for the classes I wanted, only to find out they were still closed. I was temporarily devastated. I didn't know what to register for. I was stressing out knowing there's other students right now that are also competing for spots in classes. I had to look at more classes, and of the 6 classes I wanted, I had only got 2. There were Calculus 2, proclaimed the most failed class at UNC, and also this honors course that I already pre-registered for. Does Carolina really fulfill the promise they make to their students that students can study whatever they wanted? And how can Carolina improve?
To explore more about how other people felt about registration, we sent out surveys and set up interviews. From the survey results that we received, 77% of Carolina students indicated that when coming to class registration, they have a frustration level of 7 or above out of 10. They also reported not being able to get into their major classes or class of interest, ranging from 1 class being the least and 7 being the most. To learn more about their thoughts and whether they share Jason's experience, we went and interviewed students that provided their contact information. The students generally reviewed similar experiences as Jason, some indicating they have slightly better experiences than others. Here are some interviews where we asked Carolina students of how they thought about the system and simply how frustrated they were. How many classes did you get of the ones that you wanted to get into?
So I got probably like two of like the 4 classes that I actually wanted to go, and then like the other 2 is like something that I just went on the registration and see they're open, and I just went in there.
So there were 2 classes that you have basically that you didn't plan for. Okay. Were there any frustrations you had with registration?
Just the stress of it, because I'm an early college student, so they always tell you, oh, like you should enroll as a first year. There's like so many benefits to it. What they don't tell you is that like, oh, since you're like a first year, you can't enroll with juniors and seniors, which are like the classes that you need because all your genetics are covered. So it's just more competitive to get classes that you need. I had to do all 8 a.m.s because that was the only times I could get the classes I needed.
From the interviews, it's not hard to notice the level of difficulty each student went through and that they're not entirely satisfied with their classes. But do their experiences speak for all Carolina students that may be included in different programs?
In Carolina, approximately 10% of the enrolling class are honor students. These students include Moorheads, Robertsons, and other people with merit scholarships. I wanted to find out how class registration felt for honor students. Was it similar to most other students, or was it different? I went ahead and asked some of the students living at Horton, which was the honors dorm at UNC. So Caleb, how would you describe your experience with class registration so far?
Second semester I'd say it was pretty easy and simple. My time was really early, 8:30 a.m. So I just woke up 30 minutes before, clicked all the classes that I needed, clicked submit, and I got all of my classes on the first try. So there wasn't really any problems.
So how did you feel about not getting the classes you wanted?
I didn't think I had a fair chance at getting them. The classes I wanted, some of them were, it said they were filled 3 days before I even had my registration time. I didn't even have a chance to get into those classes. So it kind of felt unfair.
Do you think there's an advantage to being an honor student in terms of registering for classes?
From what I know, I don't think there's a true advantage. If you look at it, two different ways you can get into a class. You can either do an honors class, which if you're an honor student, then you'll get in with relative ease. But if you're just doing a normal class, to my knowledge, I don't think it helps to be an honor student.
Okay, and during your second semester, how frustrated were you at what you did and what you expected?
At first I was a little, not mad, but I was kind of disappointed. But then after doing some more research, I found classes that I liked, and it almost was comical because I ended up finding classes that I liked more than my original ones. But I think for most people would be distraught after not being able to get into the classes that they initially wanted to.
Although honor students can pre-register for honor classes, most of the honor students share the same disappointment as most other students in terms of applying to non-honor classes. Those that get later times do not get half the classes they wanted in the first place. But for one student, this was a good thing because he researched more and found better classes he wouldn't have found if he did not have to research more classes to attend. So sometimes even this system can result in more research of classes, and students end up finding better classes that they didn't know existed beforehand. I wanted to see what an actual advisor thought about this, taking aside what students thought, because after all, life isn't always fair, and there could be reasons behind this. I went out and talked to Elizabeth, the assistant dean of the academic advising department, to find out more about the system behind UNC registration.
Okay, so my name is Beth Schuster, and I'm an assistant dean for undergrad STEM advising at UNC Chapel Hill.
Okay, from your point of view, what are the undergraduate experiences with class registration like?
I think that they can be extremely frustrating. I think that is less the mechanism of registering than the shortage of seats in classes.
Okay, so you think...
Does that make sense?
Yes. So you think the problem is that too many students are trying to get into the same class?
I don't think... I would turn it on its head. I don't think there are too many students. The number of students that we admit are students we should be serving. Mm-hmm. We don't have enough seats in classes to serve those students. Okay. Do you see the difference in the way that is?
Okay.
Now, I'm not at the back end in the registrar's office. Right. I'm here. Mm-hmm. Students are assigned registration dates and times in two different ways. Students are assigned a date based on how many semesters of college credit they have. And that doesn't include by exam credits, and it doesn't include credits earned in high school in other ways. So basically, if you have completed 7 semesters of college, you will register before people who have completed 6 before 5, etc., because you need to finish first. So you need first dibs on those classes. Okay. There are some problems with this, but that's probably beyond the scope of this podcast in terms of that. Okay. The timing so that determines the day of the week, in the span of registration. The times are allocated randomly each semester, and it can make a huge difference whether you have an early time on your day of registration versus a late time. You're still, as a rising senior, registering before rising juniors, etc. But where you are in that junior pecking order, even if it's randomized every semester, which means that you may be last one semester first the second, it doesn't help you the semester you're trying to get classes. They can't let everyone go at once because the system crashes.
Right.
I do know that there have been discussions about letting everyone register for 6 hours first, and then so everyone gets something they want, and then that those can be mechanistically difficult to register. So I'm not saying we have the best system, but they try to make it not necessarily equitable each registration semester, but over time you have a similar chance of going early versus late on your registration date.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And so is the day dependent on how many credit hours you have when you come to UNC, or is it how many semesters?
It's completely, that's what I was trying to say. The date so you might be classified as senior because you brought in 40 AP credits and whatever. Those don't go into determining your registration date. That you get called a senior when you have more than 90 hours. But it's, if you were at UNC the whole time, it's how many falls and springs did you have here. If you transferred here from another college, it's for every 15 hours you transferred, you're given a semester of credit towards that registration date. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And again, early college gets really complicated because those are credits earned before high school, which never... So early college students sort of register as if they were brand new first years.
It turns out that upperclassmen get priority over registration by giving earlier dates, but even she agreed that there's a lot of frustration behind class registration, saying that people who get early registration times on the same day ultimately takes all the classes for themselves, leaving little for people at later time sections to choose from. On the other hand, with so many people at UNC, they can't take in everyone at once registering, or the registration site will crash. So time intervals are needed, but this doesn't mean that the system has to be this way.
This leads to another question. Is it only the issue with Carolina class registration systems, or is this consistent across all universities? Let's look at what transfer students have to say about this.
Next, I'll be interviewing a transfer student from Durham Tech Community College and a postgraduate student from Durham Tech Community College to get their insight about their experiences with registration for classes at community college compared to Carolina. Since I am also a transfer student, I felt compelled to interview this subset of students at Carolina and at Durham Tech. I know for me personally, registering for classes at Carolina is a stressful time. If a student misses their time slot for registration, the chances of getting classes for that semester is very slim. The first student that I'll be interviewing is Maddie Fedor from Durham Tech. So my first question is just to talk about the registration process in general at Durham Tech.
So the registration process itself is not very difficult. Durham Tech does a pretty good job with laying out the classes and the course description, so it doesn't make it too difficult for students who are attempting to register for their classes.
And with advising, do they support you through this process? Could you elaborate on that some?
Yeah, advisors are really great when it comes to helping you register. They help you set out a plan for future classes for however many semesters you're going to be at Durham Tech. My advisor helped me with a plan and planned out what classes I would need to take for my duration at Durham Tech, and that really helped because it helped me see what classes I needed to take and what classes I've taken, and it just kind of gives you an idea of what your time at Durham Tech is going to be like.
So in my experience at Durham Tech, it was easier to get into classes because of the small class sizes and the different majors. So there wasn't really, the competition wasn't so high to get into particular classes. But at UNC, introductory classes were really hard to get in if you missed the registration date, because there are so many students wanting to take those classes because they are prerequisites to higher level courses. But as I went higher in levels, it got easier.
And I also
After interviewing these transfer students, I was able to compare my experiences of registering for classes and to also give some advice about how to make this process less stressful while at Carolina. According to the UNC Office of Admissions, there are currently 18,000 undergrad students at Carolina. This number is staggering high compared to smaller universities and community college. For example, at Durham Tech Community College, there are approximately 5,000 students, and only 30% of these students are full-time. Looking back at all of these interviews, a lot of the students and even the advisors suggested ways UNC can improve.
How do you think Carolina can, be more equal towards all students?
They have to do a better job of like reserving seats for times. I would feel like each time slot can only get this amount of seats in this class, because it's just not fair if somebody has a Tuesday 8 a.m. registration time, but I have a Friday 4:30 registration time. Like I have no chance to get into those classes if they're getting to register that far ahead of me.
I think there's changes that can make to the system, like probably like registration at different times, like not like during the same week, during different days, but like over the course of like different weeks, not days.
I'm not really sure how specifically, but I just feel like there must be a better way, because it's just, I feel like certain sections, like there should be a slot that's held for every time period, and you just can't have it all fill up at like 10 a.m. because there's 30,000 kids that go to the school, so like it's just not fair for a 400 person class to be filled at 8:30 a.m. and people at 2 p.m., 12 p.m. have no say, and like no say whatsoever. And if they get into that class, just based off of the time that they were assigned, not even that they chose.
In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to worry about finances. We need buildings for labs. There are always fewer lab sections offered than there are seats in the comparable lectures. Right. And we've talked to departments about that, and they are at capacity in their lab spaces. So could you teach some extra ones at night? Well, yeah, but in a chemistry lab, your space is limited by how many drawers you have for equipment, right? Because if you only have 3 drawers for equipment, then you can only run 3 sections in that room, no matter when you offer them. Right. So could we use additional facilities? Yes. We also need people to teach those classes. Okay. So yes, given where we are, could we go to a system that maybe let everyone pick 2 courses in a first round of registration and then mix up the times so that you picked the remainder, and that would make everyone have to prioritize? It still wouldn't mean everyone would get chemistry. I'm just using that as an example. But it would take away the winner takes all syndrome.
I agree that UNC can benefit from these improvements. They can input a system that leaves spots open for different time intervals, making it fair towards people who have registration at the same day but different times. This means that out of every 200 spots there may be in a class, only 50 will be open for students that have registration times at 8 a.m., and 50 more will open later for students that have later registration times. Also, UNC can benefit from more faculties to hold labs and more professionals for high-demand classes such as prereq classes, for professional schools, and some general education classes.
I don't believe the registration system at UNC is a system that tries to exploit its students. Of course, the university wants the best for its students. Maybe the system is this way so that in early years, we are made to look for more classes and explore, whereas our later years here are made to focus on a major that we have decided upon. Maybe the system could use an improvement, as some are set on a career path, but knowing they can't take the classes they have so much passion for ends up frustrating them. You never know, UNC could be thinking about this right now, and next time maybe you won't see Carolina blue squares on your classes before your time session.